Hello lovely people! This week's video is another book chat, the regular but not monthly roundup of what I've been reading recently.
Sophie Vlogs!
I've got 6 books to talk about this week and I'm just going to dive right into it. First up, we've got the first 2 books from Emma Newman's Planetfall series, which is Planetfall and After Atlas. This is a science fiction series. It's ongoing. As of recording, the 3rd book is just about to come out. Don't know if it's going to stop at a trilogy or if it's going to keep going. I will find out. I am quite a big fan of Emma Newman. I first got to know her through the Split World series, which is takes place in Bath, which is near where I live. So the concept of the Split World series is that there is a split world. There is our world, the human world, and then there is the Fae world, which is like a replica of our world, but obviously controlled by Fae. That series is so much fun, not just because like it's all set around Bath and I know what it's talking about, but also just like the heroine's really great. I haven't finished reading it yet, although it is finished, and I need to catch up. So I've been distracting myself with some of Emma Newman's other books. So Planetfall follows our main character, Ren. Ren is a 3D printer engineer on this sort of colony that is living on this planet. It's kind of hard to explain without going into super loads amounts of details, but essentially Ren's best friend went through this stuff and came out of it with the knowledge of this planet, which she said is where God is located. So Ren and essentially the best of the best in the science field built this huge spaceship and just set off on this course that just to following the word of this woman who some people think is a prophet, some people think is just a brilliant scientist, that sort of thing, to get to this planet. So the main narrative is about them on this planet. And essentially, Ren is aware of a secret which the rest of the colony don't know, which could jeopardize the entire way the colony exists. And she's been doing a good, attempting to just not deal with that. And then one day, a man appears, and this man is too young to have come with them on the ship. That's all I'll say about who he is, but his entrance into her life is the catalyst for all these things that she's been storing up and pushing down and stuff like this to start coming out. So this very much was quite character driven, I feel. So Ren is sort of dealing with a lot as this goes on, not just what she's keeping from the other colonists, but also she has OCD, which is undiagnosed, and there's a sort of, the whole book just builds and builds and builds, and this tension grows, and you're aware of some deceptions, so other deceptions take you completely off guard. And all of this whole thing, it was a really interesting read, not typical, very character-driven, very much through, like, looking at this one person, we then, like, see the periphery of all these science fiction topics, if that makes sense. I know some people really don't like the ending of this book. I feel like I'm still muddling out how I feel about the ending of the book. It's unexpected from how the whole rest of the book feels. I can see how people would find the ending quite jarring. I don't think I minded it. I don't know, we'll put a pin in that, we'll see how I feel in a bit, but on the whole I actually really enjoyed this. It was interesting is the main word I think I would use. So on to the second book, After Atlas, it's not a direct sequel insofar as it doesn't pick up from the end of the first book, but it takes place in the same universe. So this focuses on life back on Earth, because Atlas is the name of the spaceship which the people in the Planetfall went off in, and then this is looking at the child of one of the characters from Planetfall who was left behind. And in this world, he is, this is sort of like a sci-fi murder mystery in many ways. So the main character in this, Carlos, is a detective. So this is, again, a very character-driven book. It's not really, the focus is not on all the futuristic inventions and stuff like this. They're periphery to telling the story of this man who is like, has a whole emotional fallout from being left behind in many ways, and then B, the main plot of this book is a very important man is murdered. He has a connection to Carlos's past, but Carlos is assigned to investigate the murder. As this goes on, everything obviously becomes far more complicated with much wider reaching results, consequences, and where we ended with this book, I liked the ending of this a lot more. Like, I feel like I'm still muddling out the ending of the first book, whereas the ending of this book I found really, like, powerful. So I'm definitely going to be continuing with this series. It's been an interesting journey so far, and I'm looking forward to seeing where it's going to go next. Next up, we've got A History of Britain in 21 Women by Jenni Murray. This was a lot of fun to read. This is also very much an introduction, I think. So what this is Jenni Murray has picked 21 women who she feels have either had like an impact on the history of Britain, or just like who were trailblazers, who did things that women weren't expected to do at the time, that sort of thing. So just to give you a sense of like the range of women, we start with Boudicca, we go from Boudicca to people like Aphra Behn, Mary Wollstonecraft, a lot of suffragettes, Constance Markievicz, Barbara Castle, Margaret Thatcher, Mary Quant, Nicola Sturgeon. I found this a very easy and accessible read, which is a strength but also a tiny weakness in my opinion, because this is a lot of fun, but I think it is very much an introduction. We get sort of introduced to each person, a little quick rundown of their life, why she's included them in the book, a lot of her personal feelings towards them, like how she became aware of them, how they impacted her life, which I personally enjoyed. And then we move on to the next person. I knew the majority of people in this already, and I knew a lot of stuff about the majority of people in this already, but that's just because I like history, and I've been on a real, like, reading about women in history kick at the moment. So if you're looking for a place to start, I think this is a really great start point. It really gives you a springboard from which you can then go off and explore in more detail the ones that you're particularly interested in. I think as an introduction this is really good. I think if you're someone who already reads a lot of like women's history type things, then maybe this isn't really super necessary, but it did introduce a couple of new people to me, so that's always wonderful. The final book that my mum lent to me, all of these so far have been ones that my mum has ferried my way. We have a book club each week, which mostly means she drives me home from work and we exchange books and talk about them. It's glorious. She lent me this one for a very specific reason, and that's because it's all set around Tenby. We used to go on holiday near Tenby when I was little. I absolutely loved it. It was like my fave place. This was a really lovely book, and it was a really nice book to be reading at this very moment. I'm filming this at the start of April, just to date it, because it's going to go up much later because of planning and timings. But it's just starting to become nice again. Like, it's been very cold and snowy and horrible, and now we're just starting to get some sunshine. And this book made me crave sunshine and beaches. So this is one of those narratives where you have like a modern storyline and then a storyline set in the past, and then they go along like alternating chapters, and then you get brought up and it all like gets brought together. So I think it's set in 2014, storyline is about Nora. Nora is a 40-year-old woman. She's been working her job, she's been living her life, and then she's just sad. She's just going through a real crisis, doesn't know what to do with herself, breaks up with her long-term boyfriend, impulsively quits her job, decides she needs to go spend some time in Tenby because she gets this vision of the Tenby beach, and she's just like, that's where I need to be. But she hasn't been to Tenby in a very long time because her mother is Welsh. And her mother doesn't go back to Wales. She doesn't really know why, she doesn't really know what happened, but she just knows that there is something that just stops her going back to Wales. The other storyline is set in 1950s, and we follow a girl called Chloe, and every summer Chloe gets to go on holiday to Tenby. So she leaves her little Welsh village, she gets on the bus, and she goes to stay with her fancy aunt in Tenby every summer, and she has a best friend, and they spend lots of time together, and that sort of thing. And we follow Chloe through many years of her life as she comes from about 13 to 18. So I won't reveal how the two narratives are connected, but I did work it out myself. I think it's pretty clear once you've started where it's going. And both narratives sort of focus on these women finding themselves and discovering themselves, that sort of thing. And it was just such a delight. I love Wales. I spent a lot of my childhood in Wales. My boyfriend's family comes from Wales. I'm trying to learn Welsh. I keep saying this in videos. I am inchy. I'm getting there. I can read it more than I can speak it. And so it was just really, really delightful. All set around somewhere that I'm quite familiar with, so that was a nice touch. And it was just a real cozy loveliness. And by the end of this, I was just loving it. I was having a great time. I will say, I have a niggle, and it's really hard to talk about without giving away a huge spoiler, like literally the big spoiler. So if you have read this and you're familiar with the big spoiler, I don't like the way that it affects everyone's life. I will say that, because I think that there is a flaw there. I think there was... I don't know. If you've read it, maybe comment and we can chat about it in the comments or something. I don't know. I have mixed feelings on that aspect, but otherwise I really liked it. Moving on to books that I paid for with my own money. We've got The Princess and the Goblin by George MacDonald. I mentioned that I picked this up because Hannah, the dyslexic reader, mentioned it, and I was like, oh yeah, I've seen that film as a child. I loved it. What is the book like? This was interesting to read from like a let's read some children's fantasy type thing, because this was written in I want to say 1835. I don't know if that's correct, but like the 1800s. And so it's kind of one of those first like children's fantasy type little book things. So it was interesting to read as like a study in this was probably very influential on books that I loved as a child. I thought there would be more stuff, whereas a lot of it is about like her believing in her grandmother, aka God. So I'm glad I read it. I might be giving it away to a charity shop so that like a kid could read it, because I think if you're a child, it's probably more enjoyable than if you're an adult. Finally, we have a book which I set myself to read as one of my 10 books I'm going to read way back like maybe 2016? I can't remember, 2016, 2015, one of the two. And I didn't read it because I just never felt like it. And I finally read it, and that's Holding Still for as Long as Possible by Zoe Whittle. This has, essentially, we're looking at 4 people from the generation that, like, were teenagers when 9/11 happened, and it's sort of like a look at that generation and, like, the things they face growing up. So, for example, one of our main characters is a paramedic, he's a trans man, he is in this long-term relationship with another one of our main characters, and it's just like they've been together for so many years that now they're not sure if it's working anymore. She has a whole load of stuff with like her mental well-being and where she's at with her life and motivation and stuff, which she's dealing with. And then our other couple who have broken up is a girl who was a pop hit when she was a young teenager, who now that she's an adult and is not doing that anymore, is really dealing with her own mental health topics, which are quite intense. And then her ex-partner, who is less of a figure in this, but sort of like comes in at the end, and that sort of thing. This is really like an introverted book. Like, we are really looking at like the minds of these people, what they're going through, how they think, how they're approaching life, how they're dealing with these things. I enjoyed it. It was a little intense at times, I think, because, like, for example, one of our main characters is a paramedic, and it does go into, like, detail about, like, his job and what he's doing. And I just... It was an interesting read. I feel like I'm still kind of mulling it. I don't really know if I like any of the characters that much, although I didn't want bad things to happen to them. I don't know if I was actively, like... Yes. This is a little bit garbled, I feel, as a review, because it was sort of like an intense read, and I see the point of this book. I think it was, for example, it was really nice to have so many queer characters in one book, which wasn't really like a big deal. It was just like, these are all these people, here's all the identities they have. I just struggled with I struggled with, like, connecting a little bit with all the people in it. And that's just me, I think. You know, I can definitely see how people really like this. It does have a really interesting look at, like, these human dynamics and, like, these, like, interconnecting relationships and all stuff like that. So if that sounds like your cup of tea, I would definitely recommend it. It's just, if that doesn't sound like your cup of tea, then I wouldn't. That was a bad end to a review. That's all I have to talk about this week. I hope this hasn't got too waffly. I feel like I lost it a little bit there at the end. What have you been reading recently? Have you read any of these recently, / ever? Just, how are you? Come chat about books if you wanna. I'm gonna stop it now because I feel my brain falling out of my ear. Have a lovely week. I will see you next time for something more focused.